This is a tutorial to demonstrate and explain how you can connect to old school dial-up style bulletin board systems, or BBSes, that you can find still today on the internet using modern TCP/IP protocols like telnet, SSH, and what software you can use to do that, how you get it installed on a modern Windows operating system, and how you can find those bulletin board systems as well. In this example, I'll be using Windows 7 32-bit, completely stock install, and I'll show you how you can get from that to what you see on before you on the screen, which happens to be the login screen for my own bulletin board system, Vertrauen. I'm also the author of the BBS software in use here called Synchronet, and I contribute to SyncTERM, which is the terminal program being used here for this telnet connection. I'll show you how to get that software installed and use it, as well as others. Okay, what you see before you is a bone stock installation of Windows 7 with Service Pack 1. Before you make any changes based on my advice, I recommend that you use the Windows System Protection feature to create a restore point so that you can always go back to the state you were at before you did anything to your computer based on what I'm recommending. So the first thing I'm going to do is point you to a website that's going to be sort of the root foundation of everything here. And this website is called wiki.synchro.net. That's wiki.synchro.net. This is the wiki, which is a frequently updated web page. It's a community contributed content for Synchronet BBS software. Anyway, you want to go to the BBS list. You see this link here. It's actually multiple BBS lists here. The one I want to direct your attention to first is the official Synchronet BBS list. And what this is a list of BBSes that are maintained by the sysops of Synchronet systems. And once every night around midnight, my system goes out and verifies all these systems are actually reachable on the internet. And if they are, then you get your verification results. It verifies what version you're running, for what OS, and logs that here on this page. There's more BBSes than are being verified. You can see the ones here at the end weren't verified. They have different reasons why. For demonstration purposes, I'll just go ahead and use my own BBS here, Vertrauen. If you click this left link under the BBS name, then that'll take you to details about the BBS. Say, what its theme is or what its content may contain. This is just a link to send email to the sysop. And then over here is a link to the telnet address. So that's using the internet protocol that's been around for a really long time called telnet to connect to the BBS over the internet. So not using a dial-up modem, but just using whatever your internet connection happens to be. If you're not familiar with these old school BBSes, this is how people got online before everyone had internet access, and really even before CompuServe and AOL were popular. Online meant you actually were using a phone line. You were calling some kind of service that could handle one or possibly more simultaneous phone connections from users, callers we called them. And a lot of these BBSes were just hobbyist systems set up in people's homes. The first BBS by Ward Christensen, was just running in his home, just to transfer files with a coworker or friend. And they expanded beyond there, went into games and chat and message networking and, file transfers, all that kind of stuff. So anyhow, if you click one of these links here, I'll use the vert.synchro.net for my examples here. It's going to try to start the program that's associated with the telnet scheme for that URL. So it's not a website, it's going to use telnet. So by default in Windows, there is no program to handle telnet connections or telnet addresses. So if you attempt to click one of these, you're going to get a series of warnings. This is normal, and we can just tell Windows to go ahead and trust us. We know what we're doing with these shortcuts. And you get a second warning here, allow, and it does nothing. It's really not very helpful. It doesn't really explain that there's nothing installed to handle telnet connections, so It's kind of just a vague failure you get there. There is a telnet client available from Microsoft. It's actually included with your OS. It's just not available to execute. And it does not make a good BBS client, but just for the sake of being complete, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to get that program unpacked or ready to execute. So technically it's installed, but you have to go through the control panel, programs, turn Windows features on and off. I'm going to find the telnet client here, check that box, hit OK. And what it's going to do is just unpack that from a cab file or wherever it's keeping that telnet.exe file, and then put it in your System32 directory so it can be executed. And it'll also associate it with that telnet scheme. So when you do click links, it'll execute that program. So now when we try this, we don't get that first warning because we turned it off. I can say allow now, and you can see it's running a program. It's actually connected. Now this doesn't look correct. If you notice, it's supposed to say Vertrauen in that sort of ANSI art style, and it's really not legible. It's doing a poor job of rendering the code page 437 characters. And if you go back and you're running like Windows 2000 or even Windows XP, the telnet program included by Microsoft there did actually a really good job. It did a fine job of rendering what we usually call ANSI graphics. For whatever reason, with Vista, they updated it in ways that really make it not very compatible. So it could be the ANSI escape sequences are not doing the cursor positioning correctly. It also looks like the characters aren't being rendered quite correctly. So while it is possible to connect, you probably don't want to use this. So if that's all you have available and you have no other resource, then you can use it. But since we really want a good BBS experience, we're just going to use something else. And I'll show you other options here. So going back to the wiki, wiki.synchro.net, go to Resources tab, and under Terminal Programs, and you'll see there's a nice table here with several terminal programs. And the one I was just showing you, that's the Microsoft Telnet EXE. Only runs on Windows, it only supports telnet, does not do file transfers, and it doesn't do a good job of the ANSI BBS emulation. So really not recommended. So another telnet client was included with, I believe, Windows 2000, certainly with Windows XP, and it was called HyperTerm, or HyperTerminal. And since then, they don't include it anymore, but it would support dial-up and telnet. So I'm going to show you how to get this program. Now, it's not available from their website anymore, but you can download it from Vertrauen, from my BBS. So use this link, run the installer. Yes, we trust Vertrauen. Just click Next. Features. I accept. Now, you can only use this software if you own the computer you're running it on. So if you're doing this at work or something, then go ahead and skip to the next part of the video, because you're supposed to only run this on your own personal computer. So you say, yes, I own the computer, next. Install it to its default location is fine. I think it puts it under Windows NT, which is kind of strange. And proceed. And click Finish. Oh, it didn't hang. So if it hangs, it's fine. You can close it. It's actually installed fine. Sometimes it apparently works and sometimes it doesn't. But once it's installed, you'll be able to find HyperTerminal Private Edition under your Start menu. Now it's asking you when you run it the first time, or every time if you don't check this box, if you want it to be the default telnet program. So let's go ahead and say yeah, because we really don't like the Microsoft one. So now, since it does support dial-up, you do have to enter an area code, and it doesn't have to be a valid one, because unless you're actually going to dial with a real modem. But I'll go ahead and enter my area code, and I think that's all you need to enter. When you run it without opening a connection file, it's going to ask you to create one. So we're going to describe some new connection here, and in this case, we're going to calling Vertrauen, and you can change the icon if you don't like the default one. And now we're not going to be using dial-up here. We're going to be using TCP/IP. Now it doesn't say telnet, but it is telnet that it's using, and the default telnet port is 23. Some BBSes are on alternate ports because maybe their ISPs block port 23, or they have multiple telnet servers and they need to run on a different port. So most of the time you can use port 23. Now you need the host name or the IP address. Most people have user-friendly host names that are words, sort of like vert.synchro.net, and then you click OK, and it'll connect. And there we go. Now we can tell the logo looks more like we expect it to look. Now, notice that I had to hit a key there. It didn't all fit on the screen at the same time. I can go to Properties, Settings, I think it's Terminal Setup. Yeah, and I can change the size of the screen. I'm going to say 43. And I can make it wider if I wish, but 80 columns is usually pretty standard for BBSs, but sometimes it's really nice to have a longer screen. And there's other options here. You probably don't need to change any of them. You definitely want to make sure that the emulation is set to ANSI. I think you can modify the colors and such, and you don't need to change any of these settings. Now, it didn't like that changing the screen size there, so I'm going to go ahead and do this snap thing, and then we'll disconnect and reconnect, and that'll look good. There we go. So notice it didn't require me to hit a key that time. It all fits on the screen. Now what this is telling me, of course, is that I'm connected to a Synchronet BBS running on Windows, and just some copyright information and our logo. Not all BBSs have those, but it's telling us what protocol we're using, in this case telnet, what IP address we're connecting from, the BBS name, the BBS host name, operating system details, the date and time we connected, and the administrator or system operator, digital man. That's me. Now I can enter a username here if I already have an account on the BBS. I can log in as new, or I can log in as guest. Now, not all BBSs support new users or guest accounts, but generally they'll tell you here at the login if they do. I'm going to go ahead and show you what it looks like to log in with a guest account on Vertrauen. It's going to ask you some basic questions like, do you have a color terminal? Well, you know, that's pretty common nowadays. I don't think too many people have black and white, but you know, this BBSs are old school, so it's possible. Do you support IBM Extended ASCII? Well, if you're seeing that logo up there looking nice like that, then say yes. Otherwise, you could say no, and it'll translate it into characters to represent those characters, like those checkboxes we see and such. And then it wants to know your real name. Once you get all the way logged in, then this is your main menu. You have lots of options. Of course, different BBSs can have different menuing and different commands to move around. But generally, you're going to use the keyboard and use single-letter commands like T for file transfers, and then you get a different menu, and you can, jump around to different file areas, or going back to the main menu, or if they have a separate message menu, then you can look around at the different message areas that are available. If you're familiar with fTelnet, that's still around. You read messages. Door games are very popular. There's the ever-popular Legend of the Red Dragon and Trade Wars and Global Wars. You can check out a lot of BBSs just by using a guest account if they have it. Generally, you can't create content, like you can't post. Probably can't play the games. Might be able to download files, but you're not going to be able to upload, that kind of thing. /o to log off. Now, once you've created a connection, in this case we actually connected, but you want to save it with HyperTerminal. So once you do that, you can exit out of the program, and if you go back to your start menu, like you decide you want to reconnect there, you have a folder, and there's HyperTerminal connections, and then you'll see some BBSs listed there. Most of these were installed with HyperTerminal, and they're really 99% inactive, so you're probably going to want to delete all those. But you see Vertrauen down here. That's the one that we just saved. And there we are. We're connected again. So we can always use that little document. You can move it around. You can, put it on your desktop or create a shortcut. And HyperTerminal is pretty decent. It only supports telnet and dial-up. It does support file transfers, but really only downloads work. And it does support the popular protocols X, Y, and Z modem. Now, another terminal program that's very popular, especially if you use SSH, which is secure shell and the encrypted method of doing text consoles over the internet, sort of the secure alternative to telnet. Anyhow, PuTTY is a very popular SSH client for Windows. It also supports other operating systems, other Unix-like operating systems, and Apple OS X does not do file transfers. That's probably its biggest downfall for making it a viable BBS client, but still, since it is pretty popular, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to install and use that for doing some BBSes. So go to the download page. You want to go ahead and use the installer. It's kind of hard to find, but it's down here under Windows on x86, and you want to use the PuTTY installer here. Now we're in the PuTTY installer. And once that's done, you'll find PuTTY on your start menu. Here it is. And it actually installs some other programs like Secure FTP and Secure File Copy, but really we just want the PuTTY program here. So PuTTY supports multiple protocols, including telnet, RLogin, and SSH, SSH being the most popular use for PuTTY. It also supports serial or dial-up connections, direct COM port, or using a modem. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate using telnet first. You need to type the host name or IP address that you're going to connect to. In this case, we're going to do vert.synchro.net using Vertrauen again as an example. You want to name it, so we'll call it Vertrauen telnet. And we'll go ahead and just do those settings first, and I'll show you what that looks like. So you save it, and then you click it and hit open. And again, the logo doesn't look right. It's not quite as bad as the Microsoft telnet.exe, but it still doesn't look legible or what you expect to see with ANSI graphics. So we'll go ahead and terminate this, run PuTTY again, and change the settings to make it look a bit better. I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to load up our Vertrauen telnet setting, and we're going to go to the window translation page, and we're going to change this remote character set from UTF-8 to CP437. It stands for code page 437. That's your IBM extended ASCII code page. Go back to the session tab, hit save, and open. That's a bit better. It's not great. It's okay. Anyhow, we can log in. Again, I'll just use guest. Yeah, that looks better. It looks okay. I'm going to log off. I want to show you some other features of PuTTY which are kind of nice. Load our Vertrauen telnet. We'll go to the window, and we want to set it to a bigger screen size. We want more scroll back. This allows us to go back through the history of when we're, our session. So we'll set a lot of lines there of scroll back. Now, something that's kind of hidden here and not often known about, but if you go to the connection data page, you can enter an automatic login username. And what that'll do is, for SSH, RLogin, and telnet, it can automatically enter the username for you. So go back to the session tab, hit save, and open. If you notice, it automatically entered my name. I don't have to type my name. So that saves some typing. You still got to type your password. But if you're using SSH, it looks a bit different. I'll show you that. Now, if you want to, save multiple protocol types, it's good to, load one setting, just change the name, change the protocol, and then hit save. So now I have Vertrauen SSH and Vertrauen telnet. Now, when you connect via SSH, it asks you if you want to trust. This is only the first time. If you get this message again later, that's kind of an indication that maybe you're connecting to a different host. And then, of course, you got to enter your password. Now I'm going to show you a trick with RLogin. So again, I'm going to load the Vertrauen telnet, change the protocol to RLogin. You see, notice the port changes to the default port, the RLogin port. If you go to the Connection RLogin tab, you can enter the local username. That's actually what they call the client username parameter of the RLogin connection. But I can actually enter a password here. Go back to save. And this is going to be RLogin, so I'm going to change the name. And I open this one. Now, that's not my password, so it's gonna fail to login. But if it were valid login, it would actually skip a lot of the login process and log me right in there. So that's kind of a cool feature. It's a good demo of PuTTY and how you can use it for BBSing. Again, it's sort of limited in that it doesn't do the file transfers. The ANSI emulation is just okay. but there's a sort of derivative of PuTTY called LePuTTY. It's based on an older version, but it does support Z modem file transfers. So if you really love PuTTY and you want to do file transfers, I guess you have that option. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump to SyncTERM. You'll notice that the name starts with sync, like Synchronet, and that's not exactly a coincidence. It was originally created by my good friend Deuce, and I've contributed some code, and it's my terminal of choice. So I'll go ahead and show you how to get that installed. Now, there is an installer. It's somewhat old now, but it does some things that are nice for the Windows environment. So we'll go ahead and use the installer. And you have to click this link, get an executable. We trust it. You notice it has a date in the file name from 2011, so it's about 2.5 years old. And if you want to create some shortcuts, you can do that. And then you want to probably leave all these other checkboxes set so that it'll automatically handle your telnet, RLogin, SSH connections. Once that's installed, you'll see it's available under the Start menu, SyncTERM. There's also a link to the Reconnecting BBS website, which I think that link is no good, so we'll go ahead and delete that. There's a link to the SyncTERM website, which is valid, and then the program itself. So although it's text mode, you can use a mouse. You can pop between menus and click on things, or you can, of course, use your keyboard. Left and right arrow, move between these windows. Now it comes with a BBS list, and it's, again, from 2011, so a lot of these BBSes may or may not be up. And also, this version, it's a beta version, you can tell by the B there, but it's also kind of old. It's from, like I said, 2011. So, while, again, you can use it, you can use this BBS list if you wish, I recommend updating to the current development build. So if we go back to the website and grab this Win32 zip. So what we want to do is go ahead and just select all these files and copy them. And then we want to go to find the program files directory with SyncTERM. And just go ahead and paste it in here and say yes, you want to overwrite. So now the SyncTERM executable and the DLLs and the fonts have all been updated to the latest that's available from the nightly development builds. The other thing we probably want to do is update the BBS list itself. So if we go back to the wiki and the BBS list page, a couple of these items have SyncTERM list files. We'll go ahead and grab the official Synchronet BBS list. So this is the one that's built nightly. And what we want to do is save target as. So I just right click on that link, save target as. And then I want to make my way to the users Rob. So we want to go to app data roaming SyncTERM. Yes, we want to overwrite it. So now when we run SyncTERM, it knows we downloaded it, so that's why it's warning. So turn off that checkbox. We trust it. Now you notice you're getting this error, and that's because we updated to the latest, but we didn't heed the warning on the website, and I'll show you that. So it's actually not going to work just quite yet. And you notice here it says we now require this runtime distributable package. Now that that's installed, when we run SyncTERM, we'll no longer get that warning. And you'll notice the list is different. The list of BBSes is now different. These are only BBSes that have been validated as online as of midnight yesterday. There are some options here. You can, of course, click an item and it will dial it. If you hit a letter like V, will take you to the entry starting with V. F2 will edit, so I can edit the items. I can change the protocol used to connect. I can enter a username and password for auto login. I can, set the paths of the directories for downloads. I can also change the sort order. You use Control S, and then you can change the order. And if you want to add an item, you can just select an empty item there and add one. So, like we want to go ahead and delete these, let's say, and put in the date last connected. And then we'll connect to Vertrauen. I just did that with the Enter key, and if I hang up, Alt-H, now Vertrauen's back at the top of the list here, where it should be. Now we also have a dial-up connection here, so that'll use a modem, but there's no modem on this computer, so it'll give an error. So this is actually running in graphics mode, which supports custom fonts. Now I like to run in a bigger screen mode, so if I go like say 80 by 43 for example, you'll notice that the font gets pretty tiny. You can resize and make this big. If you like that look and feel, then keep it this way. For me, go to video output mode and change that to Win32 console, and then when I exit out and run it again, it's going to look a bit different. So here we are, we're connected with the latest SyncTERM, with the latest Synchronet BBS List, our dialing directory there. If you modify your dialing directory, you probably don't want to overwrite it with a downloaded syncterm.list file, but it's a good start. Now once you do start logging in and such, you can always use scroll back. That's a handy feature. Alt-B takes you back, and you can go back and see what happened previously during the session, and escape to get out of that. Like I said before, Alt-H will hang up. There's also Alt-Z for an online menu. And then from here you can choose options, and it shows you the shortcut keys. Go ahead and Alt-H. Takes us back to the dialing directory. Escape will exit the program. Okay, so let's say that you didn't have the ability or you didn't have the desire to install any programs on your Windows computer, but you still wanted to use a BBS, one of these old school style BBSes. You do have other options. If we go back to the Synchronet BBS list, so let's go back to the wiki, the BBS list, the official Synchronet BBS list, and you take one of these BBSes sort of at random. So let's take Vertrauen. And most BBSes do have a website. Some of them are just static pages, and some of them have dynamic content allowing you to actually interact with the BBS or the users on the BBS. So most Synchronet BBSes do have a dynamic website, and in this case this is the Vertrauen one. It's not all that impressive. This box here in the middle of the screen is usually my weather station or my weather cam, but I do not have Flash installed in this browser. Like I said, this is a bone stock version of Windows 7 without Flash installed, so you don't see anything there. You can actually log in here. You can even do some things without logging in. Technically, we're logged in as guest right now because there's a guest account on the BBS. And we can create a new user account if we wanted to go this route. It's not very old school. It's kind of more of a modern way to use a BBS, but you do have that option. You can also use a web-based console or web-based terminal. The oldest one I have here is this Java telnet, and I'll show you what that would look like if you tried to execute it and you don't have Java. You're going to get a warning, so I can say don't show me the warning, and then I'll get a web page saying I don't have Java. Well, that's true, I don't have Java, so let me show you what that looked like if you did. So I'm going to go ahead and pull over this Windows 8 browser, and this one does have Java, so you can see the weather camera looks correct now. And if I go to that Java telnet link, I had to do some security things and disable certificate verification, that kind of things. Then I have to tell it to go ahead and run. And it's a little weird. It works, but not too well. But it's got some flashy weirdness going on, and it doesn't render the ANSI perfectly, and I think there's some weirdness with some of the door games that are popular. But it does kind of sort of work if you can install Java and if you can overcome some of the security checks that are now imposed and make it difficult to run Java. Now, this is assuming, of course, that the BBS has a website, and on the website they have a Java telnet app. So it's possible. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect. go back to the Vertrauen homepage, and I'm going to show you the other option. And that's if you have Flash. So going back to the Windows 7 install, bone stock, again, no Flash is installed, so that's what you're going to see if you don't have Flash. So if you go through, going to adobe.com and installing Flash, then this is what you would see. I'll bring back my Windows 8 browser. Go Flash Telnet. Get this nice splash screen. You click the Connect there. And it's using Telnet, and it does support file transfers, and it renders the ANSI really well. I think there's a version of this, I don't know if this one does, but some of them actually support RIP. There's multiple terminals from this developer, who's been active in BBSs for quite a long time, and this is an excellent contribution to the BBS community. You can log into any old school BBS just using nothing more than a web browser, as long as it has Flash. And it looks pretty excellent. Again, I'm just logging in as guest just to give you an example, but sort of the example of the ANSI. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate how to download a file using fTelnet. So assuming you navigated the BBS, found a file that you want to download. It only supports YModem-G, so whatever menu to choose that. I'll say I don't want to hang up when I'm done. You right-click the terminal window, you say Download Files. There you go. Files successfully received. So I got to hit this to save the files, and I'm prompted where I want to save it, like Downloads. You can even download, which you can't do with PuTTY, and it supports uploads. Thus ends my demonstration of BBSing using modern Windows operating systems. Whee!
That's a good YouTube video! You're terrible!